let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the podcast where we talk about gaining, fetishism, and everything in their orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it. Today we're welcoming to the show for the first time. Today we've got our friend Abraham.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing good.
Good.
Thank you.
Good. Glad to hear it. We're very excited to have you on. This is actually really lovely because Abraham, of course, you're one of those lovely people who first reached out to us over email. And we always say this, if you all want to chat to us and you don't necessarily have the usual social medias, reach out to us at thiccradio@gmail.com, and Abraham did exactly that. We've had some good chit chats over the last few months, and Abraham's actually suggested some really awesome episode concepts, including what we're going to be talking about today, which is the experience of being a side. So listen, Abraham, are you ready to get into it?
Ready.
Fantastic. Well, just to kick things off, I want to ask you here, how do you personally define being a side?
I understand being a side as being gay, but not being into conventional gay sex, which is anal, I would say so. I'm not so sure if you could include oral sex, but I don't include oral sex as conventional gay sex because there's no penetration. That's what I think.
I know that it's a term that's been coming up a lot more in recent years, which I love. And I think we have talked a little bit about the idea on the podcast before, Tim. Maybe?
I think so, but the first time I heard that, I think maybe it was you who said it, who told me or someone said I'm a side, and the first thing that popped in my head was side of what?
Side of mac and cheese,
side of beef, side of pork,
yeah,
side of bacon. What are we talking about here?
So for me, I came across the term a couple of years ago, back in my, well, not early LGBT days, but a little bit after. And what was wonderful about the term, of course, I think we've expressed some sentiment similar to this before. I think back to maybe the fat sexual, asexual episode all the way back in season 1. I recognize that growing up and then coming out as gay, there is an expectation to perform sex and to do the sex. And I would have the sex and I would think, this really isn't for me. And then people are like, oh, it hurts at first, it sucks at first, but it gets better. And it never got
I don't know about that.
It never got better. So
I know a lot of power bottoms, but I couldn't get used to it.
So for me, when I first came across the term, I was a little bit like, oh, this is the reason why sex has sucked, because this isn't for me. I'm not a bottom, I'm not a top, I'm a side. And I think similar to what Abraham was saying, my understanding of being a side is it's kind of encapsulating all the things you do with a person when you're laying on your side. So it's a lot of things like cuddling and kissing. It's massaging and tactile touch. I would also imagine it maybe includes intercrural sex, which for anyone who's unfamiliar, it's when you basically fellate the thigh, right? And I'm sure there are going to be terms for fold fucking and things of that nature. But I would imagine that fold fucking, and actual a lot of gainer sex probably falls under being a side, It's not necessarily going in the body, but it's going through a fold,
Like a hot dog in a bun.
Like a hot dog in a bun, bitch. That's how I like my sex done. Real bad. Obviously. But I really enjoy being a side, and it takes away a lot of pressure from the expectations of sex, especially as a gainer, gainer diets, and I know we kind of infer this and talk a little bit about this from time to time, but it makes pooping not always straightforward at times. because you're eating a lot of things that go through you like that. So being aside means you're not having to like deep douche every other day to like make yourself function. Tim, you look disgusted just then.
No, because I think I've said it at least once before on the show that at one of the claws that I went to, I had to attend the fisting class.
Mm.
No, the douching class. So like I learned more than I ever needed to know about how to properly douche out, and apparently they all swear by Metamucil.
Mm. I think it is a really important conversation because, obviously when we talked about, fat sexual, asexual, it's a conversation around, how we understand our sexuality and what those expectations are. So I do think being aside is probably a concept that aligns with a fair few people in the community. So, Abraham, when did you first when were you first made aware of the concept of being aside? How long ago was that?
It was not that long ago. I think it was one or a year ago. I was curious if like the same thing as everyone else, like am I the only one? Is there like a whole community about this? So I searched on Google, like I'm not into conventional like gay sex, and the term side came up, and it said like that, and many people seem to be aside, and that's how I found out what was aside, and that there is not that it's not something that rare. It's very common.
Yeah, I think that's like I was saying before, I think that's a very important part of it. It's not something that's kind of just morphed out of nothing. It's something that really is it's a reflection of something I think that has always been there. And I think when we talked about fat sexuality and asexuality, you can identify as ace, that's totally fine. But for many people, myself included, we identify on the gray ace spectrum, which the ace spectrum doesn't necessarily determine the genders that you might be attracted to, because when you're ace, there is no point. But the ace spectrum also includes being hypersexual at one end, and when you're kind of standard assumed sexuality, you're called allosexual, it's in the middle there. But that more determines the frequency in which you enjoy the sex rather than the direction that you want it. So I think the term side helps people to kind of align and say, oh, this is just another layered identity on top of that. This is another term I can use to help direct my wants and needs when it comes to sex or lack thereof. So if I can ask you, since applying that term for yourself to be aside, how has your intimacy, or rather, how has your sense of intimacy changed when you have the chance to share in those moments with people? What's different about those experiences?
I think most people that are looking in dating apps or like sites, even Grommr, like have the idea that you're gonna be looking for like anal sex, right? So many people, the first thing they ask is, are you a top? Are you a bottom? Are you into this? Are you into that? So I think that now that I know, I can, like when they ask that, I can say, no, I don't want to have that kind of sex. So I'm aside. And it has changed that people oftenly when you say that you're aside, they won't continue answering your messages, or they will block you. Or I've had those kind of experiences. Or some people that are okay, I'm into a good like into kissing, mutual masturbation, and they're okay with that. So it's been kind of those two experiences.
Do you think that you look more for intimacy, like romance, or because like as a person who I guess I'm somewhere in the middle. I guess I'm that allosexual that you mentioned,
Mhm.
James. Um, so normally if I'm gonna have like a hookup, and I know that there's like a no strings attached and it's a one-time thing, um, I generally go for that type of thing. But there's been many occasions, and it's kind of almost been specifically in gainer world where I've had like hookups where it didn't involve any of that, but it was still, there was because there was the gainer element too. So like I was being fed, or I got to play with a huge belly or something like that. Where was I going with this? Oh yeah, sorry. So are you looking in a frame of mind where you're not looking immediately to get penetrative like dick and ass? Is the alternative that you want intimacy and romance?
I don't normally look for romance. I just want like intimacy. I'm not that kind of a romantic person with someone I've just met. So I sometimes just want some intimacy that doesn't involve anal sex.
Hmm.
Do you think it's possible that because like I mean I'm just thinking I'm spitballing here, but so I remember being a closeted teenage gay, then a coming out teenage gay, and then a young gay and all this stuff. And like up until I was about, oh God, how old was I? 17, 18, something like that, before I finally had like a gay sexual encounter. But I had watched a lot of gay porn by that point. And so I kind of thought that that's just how everything was supposed to go. And I was about to say, do you think that because gay men of a certain age have been trained to kind of think that this is what sex is supposed to be between two men, that it becomes a lot more like animalistic and clinical as opposed to passionate?
Yeah, yes, definitely. Because when we're growing up, we find out about how it's gay sex because of porn. So one has the idea that it's just supposed to be like this, and it can't be any other way. So when I was growing up, I was like very excited to have my first experience, and I actually didn't like it. I actually tried to bottom or top, and I didn't like it. It hurt. I didn't even feel pleasure. And first, I thought something was wrong with me because I don't like something that everybody else likes. So it did take a while for me to understand what I liked.
I think it's worth considering as well, much like we've been touching on this whole time, when there is an expectation for sex, I think it can create a lot of stress, especially if you don't enjoy sex in that kind of a way. I know that that was my experience. So a lot of times when I was looking to have someone come over, I was trying to say, like, oh, do you want to come over for cuddles? I meant cuddles. Every other faggot did not. And that was difficult because I just wanted a snuggle. I wanted a little cute something. I didn't want something in my butt, and I didn't want my thing in someone's butt. And when that moment would come around, it always made me feel very uncomfortable. It made me feel like, if I'm honest, I felt very vulnerable physically because it felt like I've been very honest about what I want. And here is this man expecting sex, and now I feel like I have to give it when I wasn't thinking about it, wasn't doing it, wasn't stipulating it at all. And then you get the guys who were like, oh yeah, but I knew what you really meant. I knew what you really were on about. You know, as if it's playing some kind of a role play game. Like, I'm going to ask you to come over, and then I'm going to play hard to get. Like, so much of that makes me feel so sexually uncomfortable because I'm now in a very vulnerable state. I've just opened myself up to you physically for affection, and now sex is being pointed at me. And that makes me feel, ugh, really uncomfortable.
We were just talking about this the other day, you and I told you about that long game seduction bullshit that some gay men of a certain age try to pull.
Mm.
It's like, let's just draw this out. I'm going to give you a little bit of crumbs here, a little bit of crumbs there, kind of keep you stringing along, interested. About 4 a.m., I'm going to finally like pounce on you and try to stick my cock in you. Yeah, I don't know what it is, but I see it a lot less now, thank God. But when I was out and about, in my younger days, stomping grounds, like that shit was all over the place and it just irritated the fuck out of me.
I wonder if it comes from a place of unconfidence. If guys kind of feel like they have to get you on the back foot, or they have to get you when you're tired, or when you're close to giving up, which in so many ways just reads like sexual assault, you know? And I think we have to consider conversations that are being had about how not enough gay men recognize the misogyny that they don't deal with. Because gay men love to be all like, oh, I'm not because I'm gay. Honey. Like, you were raised to be misogynist because we live in a sexist world, but you didn't deal with that when you came out. You just redirected your dating and sexual aim from women to other men. And that means a lot of that stuff does not get dealt with. These expectations of how you're supposed to treat someone or court someone or proceed through sex. And because men are just doing this to one another, it creates that back and forth feedback loop where, as you say, Tim, in a certain generation, it becomes an expectation where people feel empowered and emboldened to demand such a thing. Whereas I think for younger millennials and especially Gen Z, there's now a time where it's like, that's not really what I want. And I don't necessarily think it means that I want sex to be more intimate, because in many ways, I don't really have a craving for sex. You know? Which kind of brings me to a point I want to ask you about, Abraham. Like, a lot of people love to use the term belly sexual. Again, we referenced this in that original episode, fat sexuality and asexuality. Do you identify as a belly sexual?
Yes. When I was growing up, I wouldn't watch conventional porn. I never got hard watching other people fuck other people, right? So I could get off just watching a obese man sitting in a chair, shirt off, and that would be like, for me, my kind of pornography. And he didn't necessarily need to be completely naked, I just needed to see his belly, or not even that, just a picture of even a clothed man that just looked fat. And that to me was sexually arousing. It doesn't need to be completely pornographic for me.
I mean, this kind of touches on a point I know we've referenced before on the pod. Don't ask me to quote the episode, people. There's over 100 now. It's too many. Listen to them all. You'll find it eventually. It's somewhere in there. I know that I've expressed this sentiment before. One of the things I love about fat is that it actually broadens the potential of what you can do when it comes to intimacy. A lot of gainers talk about a love for something we call body worship, which is basically where you just drop to them knees and you just do what you got to do to that beautiful big body. And sometimes it's impassioned and rough and tactile, and sometimes it's soft and romantic and sensual and intimate. And the glorious part about it is, while the belly is oftentimes a focal point for us, the fat pad is tasty. The love handles are great. Them chubby thighs, the bingo wings, chubby shoulders, titties, neck, cheeks, back of the neck rolls, butt cheeks, chubby calves, and all of that. That is the entire human body transformed into a vessel for what is ostensibly some kind of sex. And none of it needs to involve penetration. But you could spend hours doing all sorts, and in my experience, make a man come without touching none of the giblets. You can absolutely have this wonderful smorgasbord experience. And I think the side element really lends itself to that. Because once you take penetration off the table, it makes you worry a lot less, I think, about mess. I think it makes you worry less about diet and maybe what you've eaten beforehand or after. When I consider feeding sessions that I've had, it actually opens you up to greater sexual experiences than thinking, we have to plan what you feed me and how much you feed me, and if we're going to have penetrative sex, how hard you can fuck me, because my belly is full of fed things and it's all going to come up if you pound me too hard. That's a lot of stress. The side identity helps to take away from a lot of that pressure, I think. I mean, to put to you here, Tim, I know that oftentimes you come back to this. You're someone who does enjoy penetrative sex. You love it.
Yeah.
But do you find that what we're describing in terms of a side identity, do you feel like that aligns with maybe how you've had some of the more traditional gainer sex?
Yeah, absolutely. Which I was totally fine with. Like, yeah, I may love penetrative sex, but that doesn't mean that I absolutely have to have it in order to have a good time. Like, I have had plenty of non-penetrative, if that's a word, experiences with gainers where I'm just like, there was a guy that I would hook up with occasionally who didn't want to do anything but have me touch his belly and like get in there with my mouth, my tongue, my hands, all that stuff, but I couldn't touch anywhere else on him, and I was totally fine with that. Um, and I noticed that like the more often I was hooking up with gainer guys, the more often that was happening. And I was kind of beginning to think it was something of like a societal trend among younger gainers. I'm not entirely sure if I'm right about that, but
I mean, it could be. Abraham, if I can probe here, and feel free to disclose as much or as little as you like, but for the listeners who maybe are struggling to paint a picture of the kinds of things that we can do, and yeah, I know I might have mentioned a couple things earlier, but when it comes to being a side, what are some of the things that you personally love to do with another gainer?
I like having I don't know how would you say the term correctly in English, but it's like some rough kissing. I also like you said, touching the body, like handling the fat, touching all their folds, like getting in there, feeling all the body parts. And another thing you said is the intercrural sex is another thing I enjoy. Even oral sex, I do enjoy, but I almost like everything else, just not penetrative sex. Even from just kissing, mutual masturbation.
And you don't like to be the top either?
Mm, no, no,
Oh.
no, no. The thing I've experienced with being top is that sometimes, like, I can't maintain my erection. I don't know why, but
Hmm.
when I'm siding, like, I can stay hard for plenty of time.
Yeah, there's your reason. Like that's anytime that it is, like it's usually psychological. So like if you're
Yeah.
not really into it, then you're not gonna, yeah. So that's why.
Yeah, and just to circle back here, I want to be clear about this because obviously what we're talking about is, personal preferences when it comes to the ways in which we have sex. I want to be clear on a point to this, and no shade to what you were just sort of inferring, Tim, but I want to be clear to listeners that if you identify as a side, or if someone identifies as a side, they are not broken. They are not damaged. They are not necessarily struggling with the psychological desires of something, as in something that needs to be cured. For some people, perhaps that is a way for them to navigate SA trauma or potentially other things, if that is an aspect of it. But that's a very particular conversation. The identity of being a side is genuine and rooted in the reality that some people, by nature, do not desire penetrative sex. And I want to be very clear about that because I think sometimes we also struggle with that in gainer culture when it comes to notions around feeding. There is this idea that if you are a gainer, you must want to be fed and you must enjoy feeding and it must turn you on when you eat food and jack off. But no one has the exact same flavor profile of sex, And I think it's very important that we remember that part of the importance of the language and why it's introduced is to simply broaden our ability to communicate what we want and how we want it done, And as I say, that's no shade to anyone. I'm not, about whoop-de-woo, whatever. But I just want to make sure that for listeners who are still coming to terms with this term, I talked to someone just today who had never heard of this term before. And, it's no shade because we're not always up to date on lingo and what's going on. But I want to make sure to anyone listening that we understand that this is not about mitigating trauma. This is about understanding genuine frames of intimacy and attraction. I want to ask you, Abraham, because I know we've obviously talked about this a little bit tonight already as well. Do you feel like the side identity maybe more accurately aligns with how many gainers and fetuses like to enjoy their type of sex?
Yeah, because I feel that most gainers like being worshipped. Like if you're a gainer, you're getting fat. You want someone to acknowledge that you're getting fatter, I think, because if someone just wants to fuck you in the ass, it's like you're just having sex, but no one's like admiring your body, your fat. So it's like you don't feel necessarily the fat when you're having sex, as when you're siding, you're feeling, you're touching. So I think, yeah, most gainers, I think they do like siding, but most people still like conventional anal sex.
And that's another thing, right? Because obviously the term verse exists to describe someone who likes
Yeah.
both topping and bottoming.
Yeah.
I think it's entirely possible to say like, oh, I'm a top side. I'm a bottom side. You can express that I am very much this, but also you're thinking like top side.
I can't. Sorry.
Are you thinking like the jellicle cats in the heavy side layer or some bullshit?
I was just, I'm a top side, and I'm like, I'm sorry, what? Like, I'm old. It takes me a minute to get things. I'd be like the bottom side of what?
But it's true. I think you can absolutely say, like, I love a combination of these two things. I primarily side maybe, but on occasion, with the right person, after enough time of getting to know each other, maybe I could be comfortable with bottoming. Maybe I could be comfortable with topping or doing some other bits and pieces. Once again, it is a lovely expansion upon the proclivities of sex. It's not a limiter in any way, shape, or form. Um, Curiously, how has identifying as a side affected your dating experiences, especially when it comes to other gainers?
I haven't had many dating experiences within the gaming community, but I have with other gay men. So I find it that they find it okay for the first 2 or 3 dates, but afterwards, like they're demanding anal sex, and like you say no's and they go away. Like they're not very open to trying something else because they're used to, well, they know what they want. So, and if they're not getting what they want, they usually leave.
I mean, I think that's very reminiscent of men in general. Men, unfortunately, I think fall under the very, very simple descriptor of if they want it, they show up. Therefore, if they haven't shown up, that's your answer, right? Um, But I actually wanted to ask you as well, like, when do you bring that up on a date? And as you say, like, oh, as you get to know people, maybe you tell them. I find for me, I'm having to disclose this kind of stuff early in the cut. For example, like I'm a poly open person. I have a partner. Do I post about him? No. That's our way of maintaining privacy, which is how we like to have our relationship. I have full permission to go out and do things, but if the opportunity comes along to go out and do some kind of something, I know that people need to be aware of things. I don't hide it. I make sure that it's declared, like, oh, let's be upfront about this. I have a partner, poly open, it's all good. Yeah. Same thing with being a side. Oh, what kind of things are you interested in? Well, I'm a side, so, typically speaking, I like to keep things cute, fun, simple, you know? I mean, Tim, as a non-side, like, how do you go about having a conversation around being a donkey dick daddy top?
I don't have to.
You don't have to because that dick's so big, it just swanging, bitch. It just just you walking along through that bar and people know you coming because faggots be tripping up over that donkey railing on the floor.
You know what, hon? Since I became a sexually active adult, more people have talked about my dick than I have. But basically, I just have to post, and this was in my thinner days. I mean, I don't know what it would be like now if I, like, say, downloaded Grindr again out of nowhere. But in the older days when I was thinner, all I had to do was post a couple of photos on Scruff, and, wasn't really that difficult. And because I was looking for the typical thing that everyone was looking for anyway, that wasn't difficult either. Plus, remember, I spent a lot of time in a bathhouse.
Yeah,
So
very, very clean man.
that was the dirtiest bathhouse ever.
And then, and there's your mother.
Some gutter butt filthy bullshit going on behind them doors.
There's your mother listening into the episode, like, if he spent all that time in the bathhouse, why is he still dirty? He shouldn't he have been clean by now? I don't know why, Ronnie, if you're listening, I don't know why that's my impression of your voice.
It's not that far off, but I doubt she would ever hear this.
Yes, to all the mothers listening in to this famously mother, high number of mothers who listen to the Thicc Radio podcast. Hi, hello. Write to us at thiccradio@gmail.com. Let us know your motherly thoughts about our subject today. What do you think, Abraham, people can look forward to doing with gainers who are sides? Like, what are some gainer side friendly activities?
Well, you could do some feeding, you could do some belly rubs, some kissing, some worshiping. some oral sex. You could also do some how do you call this? Like role playing. You could also, I think, more things that involve like touching in general.
I like that. I mean, obviously, a lot of what we said tonight, it's very, that's the vibe. I love all that touching. You got
I
the
do have
fat.
a question. I do have a question about like relationships. So if you are aside and you're out in the dating pool, you find someone, you guys click, everything seems to be copacetic, and they are okay with you being aside, but they are more on the allosexual or possibly even the hypersexual end of the spectrum. Do you also expect monogamy if there's going to be no penetrative sex?
If you asked me like a year and a half ago, I would say yes. But if you ask me now, I would say no, because I understand that everyone has their needs, and that if if you limit someone so much, they won't even be happy in the relationship. You know, it would be more of a toxic relationship, because you're
Mhm.
forcing someone to be the same as yourself when it's that's not how they are. So
Mm,
Yeah.
I won't expect monogamy.
yeah. Again, things I've talked about before with my relationship. My partner is similarly grey ace. I don't know that he would call himself a side. I think he would call himself a top. Um, but we don't connect sexually, and that's perfectly fine. But again, this was a conversation we had on the very first date. Very first date, I came out and said, I'm a gainer. And he'd heard of it. He knew what that was about. And I was like, well, that's what I'm doing. So from day dot, if you get involved in this situation, that's what you can expect. And he'd expressed to me that he's a pup. I've got a mask, bork bork from time to time, but there's nothing there for me. I am not really a pup, and he himself is not a gainer. So we have to have that conversation. So we agreed on an open relationship from day one, because we knew that we needed to account for the fact that Mama's gonna need some gainer sex. She's gonna need a little something, something. And I knew that he was gonna need a little something, something too. Respect for the other person is giving them the freedom to meet their needs in the way that they need to meet them. And in a way, it addresses a form of relational immaturity that I think a lot of people experience, which is this expectation that a partner is supposed to fulfill all of your needs. Like, that is actually a terrifying concept when you think about it. You meet someone brand new, they stare you down and they say, you will fulfill every single one of my needs every day of my life forever and ever until you die. Like, that's a lot. And perhaps for people who are genuinely monogamous, that's something they're willing to fuck with, and they can do that, and that's great. But I think when you contend with being a side, being demi, being grey ace, being a gainer, we can acknowledge that there are aspects of our sexuality that ultimately aren't going to gel with everyone. So, with respect to the other person or persons in a dynamic, I think it makes sense to keep things open. I think it makes sense to provide those opportunities to people. But of course, that's my relationship, my experience. Abraham's got his and his own. Tim, you've got yours and your own. I think this is why we also love to do different dating episodes every now and again. Like, just see what other people are doing. What's everyone else's perspective? So, on that point, if anyone listening to this conversation tonight, whether you're a side or not, whether you agree with us or not, if your perspective in some way, shape, or form is different, reach out to us at thiccradio@gmail.com. We'll look at getting you on to exploring that a little bit more. But, Tim, what are your thoughts on all that?
I guess watching too many Disney films over the years had drummed into my head that monogamy was the way to go with everything. And plus, my parents are still together, and it's been like 45 years. So I really have no other example of like a stable relationship long term except theirs.
Hmm.
And I guess I just assumed that everyone could find that, and I found out the hard way that that's not the case because late husband cheated on me constantly. Um, but my opinion on it has drastically shifted because I don't think that I'm not even sure that monogamy is even the natural order of things anymore, and I feel like when you got a lot of love to give, why limit it to just one person? So yeah, I'm still kind of like working that out a little bit.
Hmm. No, that's totally fair. I mean, Abraham, if I can ask you here, just as we start to come near the end of our questions, um, for anyone listening who maybe has been toying with the idea of identifying as a side, or maybe learning a bit about it, wondering if it applies to them, what advice would you give to someone looking to explore that identity a little bit?
I would say the first thing you should do is like be open about it, because you don't want to be in the situation that like don't want to give someone else expectations, and don't like you're gonna feel like you're letting someone down, because sometimes when you're, especially if you're young, I think when you're trying to meet other gay people, like you try to meet and you start doing things just not to let down the other person. Sometimes when that means having an uncomfortable experience yourself. So I would say that I don't have that uncomfortable experience, so just so you can't let down that cute boy, or that's what I would say.
I like that. And I think, much like any other experience we've talked about on the pod, I would always say take a chance, see what happens. It's really not a deal breaker if you try it and it's not for you. But even if you try it and it's not for you, it might help you to learn a little bit more about people whose experiences are not your own. So I'd always say give it a go. But I do want to ask you here, for the people listening who maybe still find the concept of being a side challenging, is there anything you would like to say in terms of maybe a closing statement on what they need to do next to kind of unpick that a little bit?
You just need to understand that as a side, you don't find anal sex satisfying, but you do find something satisfying that is like mutual masturbation, cuddling, kissing, some interpleural sex. And in the end, if you have an orgasm, I think and you have a good time, that's all that matters. You don't need to, if you're a like person in a top or a bottom and you're meeting with a side, you don't need to push that person over like to satisfy your needs. And if you're a side, like if you don't need to push the other person in the same way, you just like if nothing gets together, leave it there and don't force anything.
And just before we go into the wrap up here, are there any points on being a side that we haven't talked about yet that you would like to talk about?
Yeah, I was just thinking that being a side is in a way of having safe sex.
I did kind of wonder that if, maybe that was also another deterrent, is like the threat of sexually transmitted infections. And that's why, some people I mean, obviously, if you don't want to get fucked, you don't want to get fucked, or vice versa. But yeah, I was curious if that was also like a selling point in air quotes, because I don't know what else to call it.
No, I entirely agree. And in fact, this is probably one of those things where, for anyone who, because I know the concept of as we get older, younger generations are coming out and learning about things. I remember the experience of my younger siblings that being like 12 and 13 asking me about sex, and I didn't really know what to tell them a lot of the time. So potentially for anyone listening who might know people who are underage who have questions around sex and have some uncertainty, maybe this is actually a really comfortable way of introducing the notions of intimacy, especially if there are people who are young and who have some desires and don't know how to express them yet. Like, this could potentially be a much safer way of saying, not to say bypassing condoms, femidoms, and prep and whatnot, but it could, as we say, a very good way of practicing safe sex for a generation of people who maybe aren't ready to do other things yet. There you go.
I could say that, as Tim said, that at first it also was like a selling point, as I said, because sometimes I have like some paranoia moments. At what if the guy has some sexually transmitted disease? What if the condom breaks? And I imagined like a lot of situations of anything could go wrong. So I would all say I would rather like do this and not do that, especially with someone you've just met. If you're not that confident in that person, you could like say, no, let's not have like sex per se. Let's just like cuddle, kiss.
Oh, well, this has been a really lovely episode, Abraham. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your thoughts, feelings, and experiences with us. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. Now, where can our listeners find you online?
They can find me on Grommr as chubbyalex571.
Lovely. Well, that's a wrap for now here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review. Now, if you liked this episode, the podcast, or just us in general, please share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and BlueSky at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok at thiccymouse. You can also look us up on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Thicc Radio, or at our website, podpage.com/thiccradio. If you want to submit a voice note or become a financial supporter of the show, you can find the links in the show notes, and you can always write to us at thiccradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Anchor app podcast produced by Stannnum and Thiccy Mouse.
Mixed and mastered by stannnum.
Our artwork is provided by Lokitu.
Our theme song is provided by Spotify.